Hello everyone, this is Alexander, and in today's video we'll be talking about what does each ChatGPT feature do. This of course is part of the series where we talk about how to use AI safely, responsibly, and effectively, especially for students going into or already in Year 7 at Wesley College. When using ChatGPT, a lot of people go straight to the chat box to type in whatever they need. Usually that's a question, but at any rate, they usually skip over the fact that there's 9 main features that you can access right next to the chat box that can maximize the benefit of your response and make your usage of ChatGPT much more efficient and much more practical. And so today we thought it would be a good idea to give a bit of an overview of those main features, what they can do, why you should use them, when you should use them, and as students at Wesley College, whether you should be using them at all or whether they serve little to no purpose for your studies. So let's talk about where to find these features. Well, as I said, right next to the chat box is this plus symbol, and you click on that and you get a drop down of all these different features. And today we'll just be focusing on create, image, deep research, shopping research, agent mode, and the features that are hidden underneath more. Each of these has its own purpose, and we're going to try and go through them and highlight those purposes and a lot more. So let's start at the start with create image. Well, this image feature allows you to generate photos from text prompts. You ask ChatGPT to create something, and it will, to the best of its ability, try to create that for you. And this is very useful for if you want to visualize an idea, a concept, a design. It's especially useful for presentations. And it's important to know that once ChatGPT generates this image for you, that's not necessarily the end. You can always ask it to edit the image, change the style, change some details, or change the layout. However, you should know that there are some limitations. Well, it's done a pretty good job up here when I asked it myself to generate a photo of AI. It's only so good as the data it's trained on. And really, when it's making these images, it's just mixing together its knowledge of other images to try and create what you want. And so a good example of where this might be limiting is when you ask it to create an image of a clock showing a specific time. Most clocks, when most photos of clocks have the hour and the minute hand set to a specific position. I can't remember that position exactly, but it's one that's meant to make the clock look somewhat appealing visually. So if you ask it to create an image of a clock at a certain time, so for example 5:32, it's going to have some difficulties doing that. Well, it looks like it's gotten it all right here. You can see the minute hand is more like 31 here, maybe even a bit less. There's this weird little orange thing down here. The hour hand is probably a bit too close to the 5. And it really struggles with this just because it doesn't have enough photos of the time 5:32 p.m. to know what 5:32 p.m. actually is. So it's good to know it's only as good as the data it's trained on. And you should always know that when you're using these sort of AI generated photos in your work, in your assessed schoolwork, you should always reference them. And in art classes, you should never be using these photos anyways. It should be your own work for art. And if you're using AI images to just supplement your work in another subject, you should make that very clear. Next up, there's deep research. And deep research is used when you need detailed background information. It searches across a lot of sources at once, and it summarizes complex topics, but it also takes a lot longer to respond compared to normal ChatGPT prompt. In fact, depending on the complexity of the topic that you're asking about, it could take anywhere from a few minutes to maybe up to 30, or sometimes even longer. But that being said, compared to the average ChatGPT prompt and response, it gives a lot more of a structured explanation using all the information it's collated online. So as you can see in this example here, there are a lot of citations, and it really looks all across the web to try to find the information that you're looking for. However, this should not replace your own research. It's better used for background research, and it's best used for learning, not copying into assignments, because you need to read those sources yourself to form your own conclusions. Otherwise, this could be considered a form of academic dishonesty. This, however, can sometimes be useful to get you started on your work. Something possibly less relevant to a lot of you is shopping research. This compares products and opinions by looking at features, reviews, and options. Realistically, it focuses a lot more on information, not advertisements, so it tries to be unbiased, and so therefore it's quite useful for decision making, like comparing different tech or equipment. This, of course, is more for everyday life than school, but it does show how AI can analyze choices. Next up, there's agent mode, and this is one of the most powerful features that ChatGPT offers. Essentially, it handles multi-step tasks like planning a project or organizing work. And it more so follows instructions step by step rather than answering one question. So for example, in this example here that I found online, you can ask it to plan your trip for you, an overseas trip, and it'll visit a website that can help you plan that trip and look at options, look at dates, look at times, all to try and complete this one project. However, it does need very clear instructions to work properly. Next up is study and learn, and this is possibly one of the most useful functions for you as students. It's one of the most school appropriate features, I would say. In essence, it explains topics step by step and can adjust explanations to your level. It's also designed to help you understand and not just give answers. That means usually when you're talking to it, when it's in study and learn mode, when you've got this function activated, it won't tell you answers. It'll ask you questions to try to see what you know, and then it'll give you a few hints and try to guide you along the right path. This makes it very good for revision, clarification, and practice. And as you can see in this example here, someone has asked it, or it's asked someone a question. They've said they don't know. They're trying to ask for an answer. And ChatGPT is actually very good here in saying, in just giving a hint. It doesn't give the full answer. And this is very good because it forces you to think and forces you to interact with ChatGPT, thereby allowing you to critique your own understanding and be more prepared for examinations. Next up is web search, and this is useful because it searches for current information, which exists online. It's useful, therefore, for recent events or updated facts, but just like Google, the information that it finds still needs to be checked. For example, it can give you a weather report that was published, or it can look at the recent news. So while it can summarize those sources, it's still you that's responsible for accuracy. You need to check those sources yourself to make sure that ChatGPT is not misinterpreting them or accessing the wrong sources entirely, or even making sources up. Next up is Canvas, and this is a long-form writing space. In theory, it's used for essays and drafts, where it's much easier to edit and revise and to keep your work organized. And it's about more so improving your writing than generating new writing. However, I would not recommend this feature for most students at Wesley College because it almost it very much promotes the AI generating the work for you and doing the thinking for you. And this, of course, can be considered academic dishonesty. However, if you do have a hobby in writing yourself for your own personal interest outside of school, or you need to write something outside of school quickly, this could be useful for you. However, it's very important not to fall into the trap of academic dishonesty here. There's also a feature called Add Sources, which allows you to upload PDFs, documents, PowerPoints, where ChatGPT tries to work more using only what you gave it. And this can make it more accurate for schoolwork, revision, because it reduces the chance of made up information, which we call hallucinations. That being said, in situations where you need to upload sources, I would recommend using Notebook LM instead, which tends to be a bit more accurate in that regard. And finally, there's quizzes. This can create practice questions for revisions, can test your recall, check understanding, and even self-mark. So this makes it great for exam preparation. It tests what you know, what you don't know, and it can help you identify gaps in your knowledge. That being said, quizzes support study, they don't replace it. You shouldn't be relying only on quizzes on ChatGPT as your primary as your primary form of study. You should be using a variety of study techniques that are best for you. That being said, the key idea is this. Every ChatGPT feature has a specific purpose. When used properly, they very strongly support learning, but when used carelessly, they can cause a lot of problems. Knowing which tool to use and when makes all the difference. So I thank you very much for watching, and I hope this video has been helpful for you. And please feel free to access the rest of this playlist to look at how to use AI safely, responsibly, and effectively, and how to master AI in all areas of your life. Thank you very much.